Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome in. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So good to see you all. As you're dialing in today, if you would like to drop where you're calling in from in the comments so we can welcome you, that would be wonderful. I've also engaged closed captions for our call today. And if you need instructions for how to turn on the closed captions, Allison's going to be dropping those in the chat. Oh, our welcomes are coming in. Hello from sunny San Francisco, Pennsylvania, LA, New York, Milan, Brooklyn, Newcastle, Portugal. Oh, multiple from Portugal. Wonderful. So good to see you all. Thank you all for dialing in. Hi from the Netherlands and Vancouver. Greetings to our incredible global community. So this month, our community call is dedicated to mindset and mental health in activism and collective movement spaces. And you're going to get the opportunity to hear from a wonderful panel of community members about how they stay positive and inspired while doing community movement work, and about caring for yourself and others in these spaces. But first, to get us started, I would love, as you are dialing in and getting settled, if you want to share what you're doing to take care of yourself or the community around you this spring, that would be wonderful to hear from you. Hi, Sophia from Costa Rica. Yes, and just noting again that we've dropped instructions if you want to enable closed captions on your screen as well. Hi from Washington State, Richmond. So wonderful to start the month with you all. As you're sharing what you're doing to care for yourself and your community this spring, Allison's going to drop our wonderful panelists' bios in the chat for you all. We're joined by some incredible speakers today. And we'll get started with our panel discussion. And like always, we'll have some room for question and answer. So we'll be watching the chat as well for those responses. Ashley writes in, prioritizing sleep and exercise, which is hard when there's a lot going on, but so important. 100%. Sleep is my number one as well. I'm so glad that you all are taking care of yourself by spending time with people you love. I think that's so important and why I enjoy so much starting my month with you all here in this community call. Okay, we'll get started with our panelists, and please keep your comments coming in along the way. Kim, my first question is for you. Kim is a neurodivergent Filipino storyteller, writer, and somatic and sound practitioner whose creativity centers on embodying inclusive wellness and learning to be in reciprocity with the earth. Kim, do you have any mindset shifts that help you stay grounded, optimistic, and inspired while you're doing wellness work? And how do you come back to hope in your activism?
Yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to speak on this panel with such amazing people. When I think about mindset work, I think about allowing myself to not resist any feelings that come up that might feel uncomfortable as we're doing this work, but allow myself to feel all of the feelings. So, for example, right now we are witnessing a terrible genocide and ecocide in Palestine, and a lot of my feelings right now are oscillating between grief, rage, hopelessness, and also hope. And so I remind myself constantly that isolation and hopelessness are tools of colonial white supremacy. So in order to stay grounded and to stay just totally tuned in, I ask myself, what do I need to feel to fill my cup, and how can I fill one other person's cup or help them fill their cup? And the last thing I will say to this is I live by this Audre Lorde quote, which is, I wrote it down so I don't butcher it, but it's caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare, especially living within these capitalistic oppressive systems. And so that's a little bit about my take on mental wellness.
Thank you so much for sharing. I love that you also mentioned how can I fill one other person's cup? I think that's so great to think about, and I'm seeing folks nodding across the room as well because, this is community care as well, and it's about so much more than self-care. So, can you tell us more about what community care looks like to you as we create the world we want to live in?
Oh, is this me?
That's you.
Oh, sorry, my internet is lagging just a little bit, but
You're okay. We can hear
if
you
you can't
great.
hear me, just let me know. Okay, perfect. So I think a current and powerful example of radical community care that divests away from colonial systems is just witnessing the student protest happening all across the country right now. And I use this as a really great model of an example because if you actually go to these encampments, there are daily activations happening, like they're exchanging free books, there's dancing, there's volunteers who are coming in with energetic body work for students and faculty who need it. People are showing up like with like tons of homemade food. And when I think about community care, I genuinely just like think about the way that the students and faculty have set up these encampments. And it reminds me of another quote by Audre Lorde. Seriously, I love her work, so I quote her all the time, but it is the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. And so when I think about reimagining a world that is totally divest of oppressive systems, it's so important for all of us, specifically marginalized groups, specifically for those who aren't Black, to unlearn our anti-Blackness and, and really just engage in what does a like an equitable, inclusive society really truly look like.
Thank you so much. And thank you for getting us started with those inspiring words and, of course, referencing great thinkers like Audre Lorde. I'd love to also welcome Willow to the stage. Willow is the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Atmos, a climate and culture magazine that tells stories about the environment through a lens of creativity. I know many of our community members are big fans of Atmos here. She's also the author of The Overview, a deep ecology newsletter and book. Willow, thank you so much for joining us. Though you primarily tell stories about existing with nature, you also intersect that story with fashion and culture, having written for magazines like Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and more. Fashion seems to have this real individuality attitude about it, but nature, she is all about the collective. So, how do you reconcile those two things in your work?
Well, thank you so much for having me and also for this question. It's one of my favorite questions. Um, I think it's always helpful to ground us in a reminder that concepts and words like individual and collective, they're all human, like deeply human concepts, right? And they serve a primary function of categorization and viewing the world from a scientific perspective and realistically a Western scientific perspective. When you actually break down what makes an individual, the boundaries become a lot more blurry, right? I'm made up of over 1,000 different species that keep me healthy and whole. But for the sake of understanding our world and for ease, I refer to myself as one entity. I'm Willow. When you place me in the category of a community, say this community, we become one entity that fits into a larger community, which is perhaps an industry or multiple industries. And so when we start to break down sort of what is consciousness and what is an individual, it's so much more um, arbitrary in a sense in the world of nature when we think about nature as just one big collective whole. And so I like to just kind of remind us of that before we go into like the um the role that individuals can play, right? Is just understanding that the language that we're using is already always just a little bit flawed. And that's what language is, and that's okay. We work with the tools that we have. But when we look to nature and when we look to ecosystems, we have this sort of harmonious idea sometimes within environmental spaces that nature is this beautiful collective space of um, wholeness um, and I love that, and it's wonderful. And also at the same time, most things in nature are trying to survive. They're looking out for themselves. And the reality is that it's an and situation, it's not an or. And what I love so much about studying nature and ecology is this beautiful system that we're a part of, this beautiful planet that we're a part of. Creatures trying to survive and fulfill their own needs are also benefiting the larger ecosystems that they're a part of, right? And they do that by fulfilling their specific directives or functions or evolutionary programming, however you want to look at it. But an ecosystem survives by each individual doing its part, right? The trees are exhaling oxygen, inhaling carbon dioxide, the bees are pollinating flowers. Each of those things requires the different agents and participants to do what their specific calling is. I always use the example of imagine if, you know, suddenly the bees were told that they needed to be the ones to inhale carbon dioxide, etc. That's just not how it works, right? We all have our own individual roles to play. And when I think about individuality, especially in the context of the creative arts and kind of art society that is so much geared around self-expression, well, I think about what is the overlap, what is that area in the Venn diagram where we are both pursuing our passions. And for me, passion is really a massive word here because what is passion? Like, why am I passionate about telling stories when someone else on this call might be passionate about um, garments, about making garments. Someone else might be passionate about law and policy. It comes from somewhere, and it's probably some amalgamation of our experiences, how we were raised, perhaps a little bit of our programming, what we came into this world with. And it comes from somewhere, and I have come to think of passion as being sort of nature's way of speaking through us. And so for me, it's often a question of how can we marry our individual passions with um, something that can be of service to the collective or to the whole, right? And that's how we kind of emulate what other um, creatures that we share space with do, right? It's they're fulfilling their own individual needs and purposes and staying alive, but also the larger ecosystem stays in check in the same way too. So I think that, I feel like it's just I always want to say the answer isn't going to like come down to balance every time, but it is ultimately, I think it always comes down to balance, which is to say it is okay to look out for the individual if we're seeing ourselves in a framework of that. And also, it's possible to do that to the benefit of the collective. And I think that that's a false binary anyway.
You're so right. And so often it does come down to balance and recognizing that it's not all on our shoulders, that this is something that we do together. Like you talked about the bees and the trees, each having their role in movement work. So often we each have our roles as well. Your beautiful publication also celebrates pathways to changing our world. In your change making work, how do you inspire people into action rather than they hear this information, it's very heavy, they want to shut down?
It's a great question. I think it's the question in doing this kind of work. I think that what I have, and I'll just kind of share from my own experience and what I've learned. I don't think that there's a right or wrong way to approach this kind of work, but I think what I've learned over the last 5 years working with Atmos is I think that love is a more powerful motivator than fear. And I don't mean that a um, in a way that wants to hope wash any kind of problem, because I heard someone say this recently, it's really stuck with me. But when you love someone, you tell them the truth. And I think if we can approach each other with that perspective, I think there's a permission we can give one another that we are all capable and strong enough to hold the truth and continue to move and act. So for me, that's one side of it. And the other side, I think reminding people that they are in love with the earth, reminding people that they are in love with the other beings that they share the earth with, whether that's flora, fauna, fungi, or the environment as a whole. I think that's a much more powerful motivator, because I think that where we have a real problem is that we have so many people caught up in shame around being human. And one of my favorite things to point to is Brene Brown, the psychologist. She's done so much research around the difference between, like, getting very specific about different emotions. And one of the distinctions she draws is the difference between guilt and shame. And she defines guilt as being, I've done something bad, and shame as being, I am bad. And the problem that we have, I think, right now as a collective with our species is that we feel shame rather than guilt. We have guilt is perhaps necessary for our species. And, again, most of the guilt should be placed on the very specific powers who are um, responsible for a bulk share of emissions. But that notwithstanding, it's okay to say that, hey, our species has maybe let things get a little bit too far, particularly, obviously, speaking about the global north. But it's another to say that our species is bad. Our species is not bad. Our species is. And the thing that Brene has really pointed out in her work also is that shame, when we are caught up in shame, actually no growth is possible. Like, people completely shut down. And so the challenge with always and only pointing people to the problem is that you keep them caught up in a spiral of shame. And so I have often found in our work that it's more effective to remind people the beauty of the earth. Look at this incredible, magnificent thing that we are a part of, that we're all in love with, as in that we are in unity with, that we are a part of. And part of being in love with something means that it's reciprocal, it's two ways. The earth loves us as much as we love her. And a big part of love is forgiveness and allowing space for change and new trajectories and growth. That's not what shame does. And so I think, yeah, moving towards love-based activism, which creates space for accountability, which creates the space for change and growth, as opposed to shame-based activism, I think is just what I found for me to be the most effective.
Thank you so much for those words. I'm seeing lots of nods from our community as well. And I want to read from the chat. Some of our community members have dropped what they're passionate about in this work. Melissa writes, I'm passionate about leaving behind restorative practices that have helped the planet and its inhabitants more than I have heard it, that the next generation can continue to improve on. She also writes, joining Remake was a powerful step in this direction, and thank you for these conversations. We're so good to have you in this community work. Catherine's emphasizing our species is not bad, our species is. It's so true. And thank you so much for those words. Bree, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Bree is a sought-after writer, speaker, and anti-racism consultant who brings her grassroots background to entertainment, philanthropy, higher education, and tech fields. We're going to come back to mindset shifts, where we began our conversation today. So often we can convince ourselves that by staying tapped in, by staying chronically online, we are serving our movement. But maybe this isn't always the case. I wonder how you've shifted your mindset around this. And thank you to your little one for joining us too.
Yes, I was trying to keep him on the floor, but he just wanted to be a part of this good conversation. He heard everything Kim and Willow were saying, and he agrees. So, no, I completely agree. And honestly, I'll actually start with parenting. I mean, I'd always valued this before, but as a new mom, I think it really hammers home what we're doing this for. And online spaces can be a vehicle to get us to the world that we want to be in, but online spaces are not the world that we want to be in. I think that's so important to name, because I think sometimes we like mistake the tool for like the destination, and that's not it. We want to live in communities where we know our neighbors, where we feel safe because we feel part of a community. Belonging is so part of that. Desire and dignity and all of those things are really important, and that's something that has to happen in person. And I think that digital communities like this can be really powerful ways to get there. But to echo something that you said, Willow, I think sometimes online spaces can leave us in the spiral inherently, because the algorithms are designed to keep us coming in, and if they know that trauma is what's going to keep us, scrolling, it gets really bad. And I'd seen something yesterday and it was like, the way I like to unwind at the end of the day is to hold all of the world's most horrible events 6 inches from my face at 2 a.m. And it's like, that's what a lot of us are doing though. And we think that that makes us a better activist because we are doing that. And I think that being online and being aware is part of activism. But I think there is something else too. And to go again to what Willow was saying, like we need to be able to offer people something to do with that anger, because love is so much more of a powerful motivator. There's something Alice Walker said, which was, those who love us never leave us alone with our grief. At the moment they show us our wound, they reveal the medicine. And I love that. And how Alice Walker was saying that about Zora Neale Hurston, but I think it's so powerful to remember that if we're going to diagnose the problem and reveal to people like, hey, the world is not what it could be, we have to then be able to offer what we are working towards. And that's where Bell Hooks's vision of radical love and radical imagination comes in, right? Because we've got to be able to not just deconstruct the world that we don't love, but construct one in its place. And I think when people get scared is when they fear like, oh, you're telling me this is wrong, but I don't know what's going to come after it. And so I don't even want to work towards that, because at least I know what I'm up against right now. But you're, leading me into a space where I have no idea where I'm going. And I think people just want to know that we're all envisioning and imagining and dreaming. And when we're on defense mode, we don't often get the time and the energy to do that. When we're in comment sections responding to trolls, when we are developing content 5 minutes after an event happened, we don't give ourselves space to actually process and think about, what do I want in place of this, right? Like when Roe fell, there was so much grief online. And I just remember thinking, Roe was always insufficient. And it doesn't mean that it deserved to be dismantled, but what if we had space to dream about something new that could be codified, that couldn't be so easily taken apart? And then we pushed our legislators to do that. But I think so much of the hamster wheel that we end up being on is a wheel that keeps us in the zone of disbelief and shock and rage, as opposed to excitement of the new possibilities. And that's what in real life relationships give you though. When you are organizing with people in real time, you see the joy. I go to meetings with my son and people love to watch him giggle, and that gives them something to think of. Like, what does a world for him look like? What does a world for your children look like? Your siblings, your cousins, your nieces, your neighbors, the elders in your life. Like, what does that world look like? And if we don't know each other, we can't even begin to bring us closer to that place. So again, I'm not downplaying it at all. A lot of the activism and organizing I've done has been so, it would have been impossible without digital tools. And it also involved a lot of in real life organizing and relationship building that sustains us in between, so that I can take a break from social media without taking a break from the work. Versus I think sometimes we get to a place where they're so equated in our heads that it feels selfish to go offline. When it's like, but if you were tapped into a community in your neighborhood, in your town, in your city, going offline could be an act of self-care and self-preservation. And it wouldn't mean that you're not doing the work. It just means that you're not doing it in a way that burns you out. It's exhausting to be chronically online. And having spaces that fill you up like this, but where we understand like what our neighbors need, so that when we're disagreeing on something, we understand that it's not because we're misaligned, but actually because we're just motivated by different things. We have different passions. We're afraid of different things. We're excited by different things. And when I know that, then I say, oh, that neighbor who locks their door, incessantly and seems to be so afraid of the world is not doing so because they're afraid of me. Because if they know me, then they know that we're actually on the same side. And I think a lot of times we forget that because the online minority is louder than the in-person majority, and we have to just become louder in real life.
Thank you so much for that. We're all nodding because this is the community we inspire to create here at Remake. You know, as we said in our introductions today, this is an incredible global community. We're so glad we can convene you all here, but we hope you leave these spaces with relationships so that you can link arms together and continue in this fight. Folks are saying amazing gems dropped. Thank you for a brilliant panel today. And I loved this. If we can't envision the world we want, then how will it come to pass? For you and other incredible organizers, speak about having something to fight for rather than always centering our work around what we oppose. How do you adopt this mindset in practice?
Yeah, I remember that, I'm sure many of us have had situations where we're trying to convince our family members to come along. I think people assume that Black people and Black women don't also have those things, but I just come from a Black Christian background where I've had a lot of uphill conversations and battles with my elders and parents. And I remember having a conversation with someone who was trying to push back and was like, you go to these protests all the time. And if someone came to you tomorrow and gave you and said, what do you want to change? Do you even know what you'd say? And I was like, you kind of ate with that one because I have no idea. Like, yeah, if I had all the power, if I had the money, if someone with all the power and all the money was like, I'll do whatever you say, do I even know what I'm asking for? I know what I'm asking not for, but like, what am I asking for? Right. I'm saying I want an end to police brutality, but what does that look like? We can't just exist in antis. And I think that's, not everyone might like this, but I think that's where the Democratic Party is really struggling right now because we are not Trump. And it's like, but what are you? What is the vision that you are getting people excited about? And I really sat with that and I was like, okay, yeah, like, I want a world without police brutality, but that doesn't mean I want a world without safety. What does safety look like without police brutality? What does justice like? It just really made me think really nitty gritty about things. And then that excited me because then it was like, wait, some of the ideas in my head, I don't need the federal government for. Some of the ideas in my head can be locally crowdsourced and fundraised and put together. And Kim brought this up. The encampments are a great example of that. Student organizers are constantly proving that you can do a lot with a little. Bless you, baby. You can do a lot with a little. And it's really powerful to see and be reminded that the things that you want to see in your community, you can start to implement today. And sometimes we need to apply for grants or we do need a law passed, but other times we just need to first envision that world that we're working towards. Like a world with public safety, for me, I really started to think, what are things that are keeping people unsafe? And some of those things were, there are areas of my community that are really poorly lit. And when I'm walking around in those areas, I don't feel safe. I don't need President Biden to get my community more lampposts. Like that's something that is actually very easy to advocate for on a local level, that like getting more lighting near train tracks actually makes people safer. Oh, like that, in Chicago, gun violence prevention activists are planting trees because during the summer when it gets too hot, they notice that gun violence increases. And they're like, we need shadier areas. We need more parks. We need more things for people to do. And so sometimes the work that we're building out is just as simple as thinking about what our community doesn't have and who has some power to give it to them. And so I think that has been really helpful for me. I think, Kim and Willa, we all love quotes right now. And Asada Shakur has this really great quote that I lean into, which is, let's be weapons of mass construction. And I really thought of that, like, what could we all build together if we were focused more on what we're going to replace things with than what we're tearing down? Because then, I found that a lot of the moments in history where one system of oppression gets replaced with another is because people were so excited to see one thing go away that they weren't as vigilant about what it was being replaced with. Right. So we had chattel slavery replaced with mass incarceration because people were so excited to abolish slavery that they didn't really think, oh, they're just finding a new way to imprison you. Same thing right now. Mass incarceration is not sexy. No one wants that. But immigration detention centers are replacing a lot of the jails and prisons that are being dismantled. How do we remember that as I'm fighting for myself, I have to also fight for you? That's that balance. That's that like interdependence that we've got to get to. And it allows us to be really creative. Like we don't have to think in the box of, well, what if, instead of destroying the earth drastically, we just destroyed the earth slightly? It's like, no, what if we existed in a beautiful harmony and didn't take more than we needed, and learned how to be a lot more interdependent with one another and cared for one another. You know, the last thing I'll say, another one is a lot of there's a really great BLM chapter in Paterson, New Jersey. And some of the main programming they do is a lot of like survival tactics, how to stop bleeding from a wound, how to get groceries to elders who cannot make it to grocery stores or who post-COVID are very afraid of these very congested spaces. And just remembering that if we take care of each other, then we decrease our dependence on the harmful systems that we're trying to get rid of. So I think that's something that I have really, really been trying to lean into is I don't want to critique more than I'm creating. And how can I, you know, it doesn't mean I can't critique, but I just want to make sure it's balanced. I just don't want to be constantly saying that's not going to work, that's not going to work, without having thought of what would. And let's experiment and let's try it. And my first impression might not be right, but by being in communities like this, I get to throw out an idea and then someone says, oh, we tried that in Iowa and it didn't really work. But what about this? Or, hey, it didn't work in Iowa because you have these specific constraints, but I think I'd still want to give it a shot in Atlanta. You know, we can have these conversations and we can bounce ideas with one another and find that there is so much more innovation between us than we've been letting ourselves believe.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. I'll be watching the chat for questions, but since you all referenced some incredible thinkers, I just wanted to open up for space for that. If there are resources, podcasts, books you would like to point our community to so they can continue the great discussion today, and any of our panelists can jump on.
Just real quick, anything by Adrienne Marie Brown, I love. Particularly We Will Not Cancel Us is a really great one, because I think it speaks a lot to what Willow had mentioned about we don't have to be inherently this way. And the idea that, oh, humans are just toxic to the environment kind of makes us believe like, oh, there's nothing we can do. Same thing, oh, men are just born. No, there is a socialization that happens and we can unsocialize each other. And yes, Willow just brought up emergent strategy, and it's something I think about a lot. And emergent strategy depends on in real life relationships. I don't want to spoil it, but long story short, it's just about trusting each other enough to take time when we need it, but to also step up when we're needed. And it, you know, Adrienne Marie Brown leans on the metaphor of birds that fly in these flocks. And there's no one bird at the front that's like, all right, everybody to the left. You know, it's just, you feel the person next to you shifting their flight and you do the same and you decide to stay in concert with one another. And it's really beautiful and poetic to watch in nature, but to realize that we can do that too. And we can talk to each other. We can say, hey, I'm going left for these reasons. And I would encourage y'all to join me and experiment with that. And then say, all right, I got a new direction for us to go in. And it's just really important to be in tune with one another. And we don't need this one charismatic leader at the front. Everyone, you know, is like, where's our MLK? And it's like, we are all leaders in our communities. We don't need to wait for someone to direct us. We can direct each other and then step back when it's someone else's turn and space to be heard. And I think Adrienne Marie Brown really reminds me of that often. So any podcast she's been on, any books she's read, any articles are really, really powerful. And then of course, Adrienne will point you towards other amazing people like Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde and Toni Morrison and June Jordan and other brilliant activists before her.
I completely second all of that, everything, Adrienne. And I'm also so happy that you brought up the starlings, because to me, they are like the perfect encapsulation of that individual versus collective kind of false binary, and often like what sits in between, which is locality. Like scientifically, they've found that the way that the starlings do move together is by each one is in tune with the seven that surround it. And that will make up, you know, tens and tens and tens of starlings. And so it's not to say we can all be completely aware of, like, you know, the hundreds of people we're in community with, the thousands, the millions, the billions, but the people that directly surround us, we can be in tune with, and then they are in tune with the ones that they are surrounded by, etc. And so I think that there's so many bridge points between the individual and the collective. And I think local community is such a massive part of that.
Kim, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Oh no, I was literally just listening to both of them and I'm just like, oh yes, yes. like emojis all around. So I have nothing to add.
Well, thank you all so much. And Remake community, please do give our panelists the absolute warmest thank you from all of us. This has been so inspiring, has really put us on the right path forward for our community and collective work. Such a beautiful conversation to listen to. We thank you for all of the resources that you shared, which give us so many more directions to head off into after this. Please read all the warm thank yous coming in the chat from our community. I'm now going to turn it over to the advocacy portion of our call today. I'm going to welcome my colleague Alexa to the stage, who's going to share with you more about the work we've been doing around the International Accord for Workplace Safety, which you heard about on last month's community call. Alexa, turning it over to you.
Thanks, Emily, and thank you to our panelists for that really invigorating and important discussion. And hi to everyone. On last month's community call, you heard about the International Accord for Health and Safety in the textile and garment industry. So I'm here today with a few updates. As many of you know, the International Accord is a landmark health and safety agreement between brands, retailers, global unions, to ensure safe workplaces for garment workers, right now with safety programs active in both Bangladesh and in Pakistan. Importantly, the Accord is a model for binding agreements and really one of our industry's best beacons of progress when it comes to corporate accountability because of the way that it unites workers, unions, brands, and suppliers through equal decision-making power behind the common mission of creating a safer, more reliable fashion industry. So on April 24th, the anniversary of the Rana Plaza factory collapse from which the Accord Agreement was born, citizens, civil society groups, and workers around the world again came together to honor the over 1,100 lives lost that day. And Remake ambassadors in New York City put together such a beautiful commemorative event at the Butterfly Club featuring artworks and words from one of our super ambassadors, Layo, as well as a virtual exhibition by Ismail Ferdous. So big thanks to Layo and our New York COs, Holly and Colleen, for putting this event together, and to the Butterfly Club for offering their beautiful space. So now 11 years later, we're still calling on more brands to sign on to the Accord, and the number of signatories keeps climbing with 211 companies currently committed. And last week, we relaunched our Accord brand tracker, which I will drop into the chat. And this tracker names 11 holdout brands with a significant sourcing presence in Pakistan and/or Bangladesh, which Remake has also been engaging behind the scenes in conversations. And it's important that these brands sign because we know that many of their voluntary workplace health and safety programs have failed workers in the past. Meanwhile, these safety issues are still prevalent throughout the garment industry, especially in South Asia. And in April, our union partners in Bangladesh took to the streets to demand more brands commit to the Accord, and members of our London Ambassador Hub, shout out to Sophie and Rebecca, also participated in demonstrations alongside Labor Behind the Label and others to call attention to the ongoing repression of Bangladeshi workers in the aftermath of the government's 2023 minimum wage decision. And last week, you may have also noticed our first brand post targeting Amazon. As the world's largest online retailer, Amazon is a hugely important industry player with about 33 suppliers in Pakistan and Bangladesh, many of which are actually already covered by the Accord commitments of other brands producing in those same factories. And this is what we call free riding. In not signing on to the Accord, Amazon is not sharing in the financial responsibility for the implementation of the Accord safety standards, despite bringing in hundreds of billions of dollars in annual revenue. So today we're calling on our global community again to sign this petition, which you can visit in the chat. And this is by the Make Amazon Pay Coalition, of which Remake is a part. And it calls on Amazon to stop freeloading off the Accord's protections while other brands shoulder these costs for worker safety and well-being. And you'll find that the petition is a direct call to Amazon's CEO. And you can follow our campaign progress via Remake's campaigns page and also on our socials. And here is our campaigns page for anyone who hasn't visited yet. And now I'll pass it to Allison to share on our upcoming programs.
Hi, everybody. Happy May. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Can everybody see our superstar ambassadors? Okay, awesome. All right, thank you guys for being here today, and huge thank you to Alexa for the campaigns update, Willow, Kim, and Bria for sharing their words of wisdom this morning. Before I get into the events coming up, I want to give a huge shout out to our monthly superstar ambassadors. First off, Lexi and Harmony for organizing the Earth Day protest at the Shein offices in LA, plus a huge shout out to everyone who joined that action to make their voices heard. Lexi is also a PR queen, so she got their day of action in Eyewitness ABC, Sourcing Journal, and Green Matters. So if you want to read more about their Shein action in Los Angeles, you can go find it there. Next is Lio, who Alexa already mentioned. It's hard to pick and celebrate just one or two things that Lio has done for this movement and our community. If you're in NYC, then you know this already. But not only is Lio the most positive and joyful person, bringing communities of people together daily, but on April 24th, as Alexa mentioned, he took the lead in hosting the most beautiful event, remembering Rana Plaza at Butterfly Club. And he has also just left our New York hub, but we are excited to let our LA community know that you guys are getting a one-of-a-kind Remaker with you in Los Angeles. Next, Patricia. She's a Fabric State chapter lead in Virginia and has been absolutely phenomenal at getting Fabric endorsements and keeping this bill on her senator's desk. Patricia is truly weaving the needle of the Fabric Act. And if you're interested and you're in the US on how to engage with the Fabric Act, reach out to Emily or Becca and they can give you some more resources. Next up, Angie. So Angie is our co-community organizer, also in LA, and she helped turn out volunteers to link arms with the Garment Worker Center from afar at the Worker Solidarity Rally with Senator Sanders and the California Fabric Act Virtual Advocacy Day. Angie is also a co-community organizer with Harmony, who helped organize the Shein action in LA, and they are just always out with their community, making sure that all of the ambassadors are ready to go. So thank you guys for everything that you do. And lastly, Jemima. She is Remake's University's Hub community organizer, and she also led an Earth Day protest at Boohoo headquarters in Manchester with her community. And she's also just been such a huge player in growing student advocacy, and which is in our newest global community hub. So thank you guys for everything that you do. And if you have an ambassador in your community that you would like to nominate, Emily is going to drop the form in the chat so you can nominate ambassadors there. So now on to May events. And speaking of our university hub, if you're a university student and you're interested in ways to grow your advocacy journey, Jemima will be hosting a virtual call at 2 p.m. Eastern today, so about 1 hour. And they'll be discussing the recent Earth Day actions in Manchester and LA, sharing their experiences, their learnings, and then making plans for some upcoming actions. So Jemima, I know you're on the call. If you want to drop your email in the Slack or in the chat, go right ahead. And you can also find her on Slack. Next, on May 13th, we'll be hosting a virtual professional networking event. And shout out to Aaron Smith, who's our Canadian co-community organizer, for making this event happen. We'll be joined by ambassadors Anna Tempestoso, Elizabeth Joy, and then Julie Masterico from the Remake team to learn more about working in fashion and the sustainability industry. And then finally, on May 24th, our South Asian Hub Ambassador Aman Singh will be hosting a virtual educational program, Eco Threads, where we'll talk about how visual narratives shape the perception of sustainability. And during the program, we'll also be joined by Remake's own Aisha Barenblatt to hear about the recent Brandy Helvo documentary that is now on HBO. You can find all of this information, all of the events on the Ambassador Hub and also the Remake website. If you have any questions about how to access the Ambassador Hub, the Slack channel, Remake Ambassador resources, please email ambassador@remake.world. And if you go to the Hub events page or our website's events page, you can see different things happening in person and virtually, like yoga clubs, clothing swaps, in-person meetups. And if you are interested in hosting an event and having Remake involved, you can email me at allison@remake.world. So thank you guys all so much. I'm going to hand it over to Tessa.
Thank you so much, Allison. Hi, everyone. My name is Tessa Beltrano. I'm Remake's Development and Impact Manager, so I get the privilege of supporting, basically sustaining this beautiful movement that we all have together. As Allison mentioned and everyone so far on this call, this has been such a privilege just to be able to bear witness to so many of these wonderful folks on our panel today, and just I was scribbling down so many quotes from both you and those that you referenced to kind of keep me inspired throughout the month of May. And I'm just so, so grateful for your time. So on behalf of our community as well, I'm sure, thank you so much for all of the wealth of knowledge and experience that you shared today. It means so much. And with that being said, on the note of kind of sustaining things long term, I am so grateful to, excuse me, invite in our beautiful community here to find ways to resource this work however is most accessible to you this May. So as always, one of the most powerful ways to support Remake is just becoming a GEM, which is a monthly donor. GEM stands for Gives Every Month. And you may be wondering, why is monthly donating versus a one-time? What difference does that make in terms of making an impact here? And for us, as we know, in terms of serving movements overall, consistency makes such a difference, whether you're advocating, whether you're engaging with the press and keeping, worker voices centered, or working alongside, our worker partners behind the scenes. That consistency to show up however we can makes a world of difference in keeping this movement going. So consistency on the donation side can be a huge way to keep this movement powerful and moving in the direction that we want the world to see. And so dropping that link here, if you ever want to become a GEM, you can sign up right there, just choosing that monthly option in your donation. And besides maybe giving $5 a month, whatever, again, is most accessible to you, you make this work possible. And there's so many other ways to do that. And so I'm very, very excited to welcome up Paige here from Deals on Designers, who's going to share a little bit about how we can keep this unstoppable movement going and growing by supporting Deals on Designers and Remake hand in hand. So Paige, if you're able to unmute and join me here, love to welcome you up.
Hello, everyone. Yes, so my name is Paige. I am the CEO and founder of Deals on Designers. And we started this partnership probably like almost a year ago at this point. And for the past, I would say about 6 months, probably since the last fashion show, we've been actually getting clothes from all over the country shipped directly to us. So if you guys want to contribute to like supporting Remake, but in a way that I find to be like, it's what I've tried to do in building this company is to create a sustainable way of keeping fashion circular and supporting a good cause, but in a way that just like makes sense. It makes it so easy for the consumer. And so with Remake now, you can both shop online a bunch of clothes that have been donated to Remake from all over the country, or you can simply go on the website, click donate, and then donate to Remake. I'll get it probably within a few days, honestly. You can even look at the tracking number and watch it come all the way to Brooklyn, New York. And then I'll contribute it to the Remake collection. And then when it sells, a portion of that sale goes directly back to support Remake. So yeah, so it's been really exciting, and we've raised a lot of money, and the more clothes we get, the more money we can raise, and the more support we can build.
Thank you so much, Paige. We're so, so grateful to have been in this partnership now, as you said, for almost a year. I can't believe, but also Ken, that, we've been able to grow this together. And just want to reiterate too, our gratitude on behalf of Remake to be able, for helping us kind of grow this movement through that channel. I think our community is always looking for ways to keep their clothes out of landfills and ensure that they're taking good care of both their pre-loved pieces and anything else that they purchase, that they're being really conscientious about that and intentional. And so we're so grateful to have a women-owned, founded brand and organization that we can work with to help not only just give our ambassadors a really trusted outlet for those beautiful pieces, but also give back to Remake too. So it just means so much to get to partner with you and continue to grow this movement together in so many different ways. So thank you again, everyone who's participated in any way to grow the movement. I want to reiterate too that if you ever have questions, specifically even about Deals on Designers donations or how to get more involved with that, as Allison had mentioned in the chat, I'll drop my email here too. Always feel free to reach out to Allison as well if you are an ambassador in this movement and you have a lot of ideas for how to support this work. Any idea means so much. I know we are so, so grateful to every ambassador, every member of our community who's found a way to engage their community in both learning and educating around this movement, whether it's about the Accord, the No New Clothes campaign, or so many other ways to get involved, but also to find ways to support this work however you can. So again, we always want to make it accessible and easy for you and for your community to get involved so we can keep this beautiful movement growing forever. So with that being said, I will pass it back to Aisha now to kind of close us out, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much, everyone, and happy May. Hard to imagine, it's already May. I'm just blown away with everything that we've accomplished in April, from remembering Rana Plaza's anniversary, which is why this Accord campaign is so important, to all the wonderful activations through Earth Month. I think this conversation this morning is just such a good reminder to take that digital detox, go out in nature, to read, to reflect, to lean into local community. I know from talking to so many of you individually on the Slack channel that it feels hard right now. We are up against so much coming at us. And so I hope you really, from today's conversation, take those mental health breaks. I think No New Clothes is a wonderful way, as we lean into the summer, for us to take some of that detox and think more about our local organizing. So really, again, wanted to thank our wonderful panelists. And I hope you all take a little bit of time to just be proud of everything that we are accomplishing as a movement, as a community, and that we'll see you same time, same place next month. Happy May, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care all. Speak soon.